The city went totally dark last night, and tonight large parts of the city still are without power.
Ellen Hover's disappearance was a huge mystery. This was a very big deal, that this socialite, this young woman, was just gone, missing.
There was nothing in her background that suggested that she would have run away.
It's in the New York Times. It's on posters. It's on the news. It's the talk of the town.
When the police showed up at her door, they looked inside.
Nothing looks like an attack happened there, but they collect evidence, mail, notes, things like that. And one of the things they take is her calendar.
And there was an entry that said she was meeting John Berger.
They research back, and they try to ID who John Berger is.
You're talking about a woman who goes missing in New York City pre-computer. And so Rodney Alcala / John Berger was never really on the radar of the New York City Police Department.
So Alcala goes back to LA, and he's there actually trying to find a job.
Rodney Alcala gets a job with the Los Angeles Times working as a typesetter.
You have to put this into perspective. On the lam for 3 years, 10 most wanted, 2 stints in jail, felon. He applies under his own name, Rodney Alcala, and he gets the job.
He actually would bring in photographs to show some of the people at his work. A lot of the photos were of nude girls. And I think it was like the time when people didn't really question it. You weren't like, oh my God, you're a pedophile. Like instead they were like, oh, he's just kind of strange. You know, he's very artsy.
So 5 months after Alcala is returned to LA, the FBI is actually able to connect the dots between Rodney Alcala, the name John Berger, and the notes found in Ellen Hover's calendar. So Rodney Alcala was eventually questioned by the FBI in relation to the disappearance of Ellen Hover, and he admitted being with her.
Where did you meet Ellen on the 15th?
He said he had taken her up to Westchester to take a picture. They had a lovely time, and that was it. Never saw her again.
I think it'd be called like dropping her off. That was it.
At that point, they still had not found a body.
Other than him admitting to the crime, saying, I killed her, there wasn't enough to arrest him.
This is Bill McCreary in North Tarrytown with a story about the discovery of the body of a millionaire's daughter missing for the past 11 months.
Ultimately, she's found. It's almost a year later. She's found up in an area by the Rockefeller estate.
They found clothing of hers nearby. They went back to the same site, and they discovered her remains.
But it's all skeletal. She's identified through a dental comparison.
Well, police are able to positively identify the remains of Ellen Hover. There is no forensic evidence that leads them to her killer.
1970s was considered a serial killer central.
You have the Hillside Strangler, the Night Stalker, 2 freeway killers. You have the Bedroom Basher. Elsewhere, you have Ted Bundy and John Wayne Gacy killing people in Chicago.
Recently, there's been a rash of mass murders.
1977 through 1978, many women were murdered.
Police in this era are lacking a lot of the investigative tools they have today. There's no DNA, there's no surveillance camera around every corner. People aren't walking around with a GPS in their pocket.
All of these things lead to this sort of perfect storm for Rodney Alcala, where he's able to remain one step ahead of police, and he goes on the hunt for more victims, and there's absolutely nothing to stop him.
Jill Barcomb was a 19-year-old girl in New York who was adventuresome and wanted to take a trip with a friend of hers. And so she left New York for Los Angeles.
Jill and I were very close as children growing up. We were often mistaken as twins. Jill had a very free spirit about her.
Bruce was very sad when she left New York, was very scared for her, being so young at 19 years old.
So November 10th, 1977, I called home and there was crying in the background. They said, you need to come home. You need to come home. And that's all they would say.
Jill Barcomb was found off of Franklin Canyon Road, and it was down the street from Marlon Brando's home at the time. She was found bent over, half naked. Her head was facing the dirt.
She has multiple ligatures on her neck. It was a brutal crime scene.
I came into a house of siblings, distraught, righteously so, and heard it from my mother directly that my sister was dead.
Her face was unrecognizable. Her brother said at the funeral that he couldn't even recognize his sister. It was so mutilated.
I had night terrors the day that Jill's body arrived. It wasn't just murder, it wasn't just rape, it was brutal, it was sadistic. And nobody could understand why the things happened to her.
They thought perhaps this could be the work of the Hillside Strangler because that's what the Hillside Strangler did. He strangled women and left them on the side of the road.
And it complicated this investigation because Jill Barcomb had a friend when she got out to LA that was actually abducted and murdered by the Hillside Strangler.
In the end, the police were unable to link the murder of Jill Barcomb to the Hillside Strangler, and the case just went cold. That meant the string of murders of young girls and women continued.
Georgia Wixted was 27 years old. She was absolutely gorgeous. She was a nurse that worked for cardiac care.
She was from Los Angeles. She worked out of the Centinela Hospital and just recently moved to Malibu.
Every morning she would pick up another nurse and they would drive to the hospital together to do their shift. And one morning she didn't show up.
So the police were called to do a welfare check of her in her home. It was discovered that her window was open and the screen was removed. When the police entered her home, there was blood everywhere. Her body was completely naked and strewn on the floor, kind of posed open.
The viciousness and the sadism involved in her murder is so disturbing and so profound.
There was a handprint that was found on the brass bedding, but there was no one to match the palm print to. And again, that case went cold.
And the third person who was found dead in the same way as the other two was Charlotte Lamb.
Charlotte Lamb, in 1978, was a legal secretary living in the Santa Monica area. She had called some friends one night to go out and go dancing in Santa Monica. Her friends decided not to go. Her body was later found in El Segundo, miles away, in an apartment complex she had no connection to.
She had been strangled and she'd been brutally raped and murdered. Her arms had been folded behind her back, which made her back arch to expose her breasts. She'd been posed. It's just very disturbing and incredibly sad.
I met with Rodney 5 or 6 times. I administered assessments with regard to his sexual interests. Many times the rapist, killer, antisocial person will pose dead bodies, and they do want law enforcement and other people to see this, and there's a message in that. The message for Rodney is that I am here, you will remember me.
So instead of hiding in the shadows, Rodney Alcala is almost fearless, and he puts himself out there in perhaps the most public way possible.
Rodney going on the dating game is a great example of him being predatory, him being confident, narcissistic, and of course he wouldn't go on unless he would win.
And 5, 4, 3.
He always wins.
Factor number 1 is a successful photographer. He might find him skydiving or motorcycling. Please welcome Rodney Alcala.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.